I have to congratulate the British government for refusing Angelica Navarro a visa, or not refusing it, but effectively denying her one, because she is genuinely a dangerous woman. I mean, I would put Meena on that list as well, frankly, and probably lots of people here. Anyway, Angelica Navarro, I came across her in Geneva, and I hadn't really, at that point, realized the importance of Bolivia in these talks, and as a sort of moral compass for the whole world, actually. And it became very clear that here was a young woman who was in a position of fantastic responsibility. She was doing the climate negotiations in Geneva for the UN on behalf of Bolivia, but she was also doing the World Trade talks as well. And here was anyway, it was a staggering sort of perception that what is going on in parts of Latin America at the moment are so far ahead of how we've been thinking about environment or development or philosophies about nature or how we relate to the natural world or individual people or countries. And what's going on is staggeringly important, I would say. And I can only sort of compare it to what I imagine was going on in Athens, in Greece a couple of thousand years ago, when you had all these different sort of city-states all having their own ideas of what, how to govern themselves. And so it's completely by accident we ended up with this thing called democracy. But what's going on in Latin America? You've got 4 or 5 countries now, 6 countries, all of whom are working from a social base towards what they would call the good life or the summa quasi. So, yes. Fantastic. So, but combining indigenous thought and much more sort of ancient thought about nature and treating nature and peoples with sort of a much more sort of modern philosophy. So you've got these social movements working with unions, working with bankers, with all manner of different people who are redefining how we can live. And it's fantastically exciting. I'll give you 2 teeny-weeny examples that I was in Ecuador. I mean, first of all, I should say what's going on in the Andes is a complete climatic disaster at the moment. The glaciers really are melting, the droughts are getting longer and more intense, the frosts are getting harder, the animals are dying, people are having to move. I mean, it's a terrifying scenario which is being sort of played out at the moment, and hope God it doesn't go any further. But it's like it is the transformation of a vast region is taking place underneath our eyes, and anybody I would say who doesn't really sort of believe that climate change is taking place, I'd just say go there, talk to people. And every single person tells the same story. And it's interesting because they tell the same stories as they do in the Himalayas or parts of Africa or wherever. And so really sort of climate skeptics here, we'll talk about it afterwards. But, what's going on is fantastic. I'll give you one example. In Ecuador, they have got a huge amount of oil, vast amounts of oil. So they found 20% of their reserves, like 1 billion barrels, 1 billion barrels of oil have been found in this national park. So, I mean, the obvious thing we'd do in Britain would be to dig it out and sort of change the rules a bit and change the border of the national park. But we talked to the oil minister, and extraordinarily, the oil minister says, no, let's leave it in the ground. And I mean, this is completely unbelievable. An oil minister who says, leave it in the ground. And that's the idea. So you leave it in the ground, but you can earn money. Developed countries can put in money to leave it in the ground. It's finding a different way of funding, if you like, sustainable development. And it will be up to rich countries now. If they choose to put in money, then that oil will stay in the ground and will never be used. But it's going to cost us, and that's a basic thing. Thing to remember, I think, about climate change in these talks is that they have nothing to do with climate change in a funny way. They have everything to do with development of countries over the next, or geopolitics over the next 20, 30 years. So what you're seeing played out is kind of the rise of China in the East and America in a sort of rather desperate corner at the moment. And you're seeing emerging these countries like the Alba countries, with Bolivia and Ecuador and Honduras and whoever, offering much more imaginative and different solutions, and taking the rest of the world with them. And that's what's fascinating. It's not just Bolivia which is asking for a 1 degree maximum rise of temperatures over the next 20, 30 years. These are 100 countries now. And so the influence of countries like Bolivia, who will give a moral lead and a philosophical lead to the rest of the world, is phenomenal. So now you're seeing, and behind Bolivia come the LDCs, the least developed countries. Behind the LDCs, you find the Africa group. Behind the Africa group, it goes on, and that influence is being played out. So if you like, the poor have found a voice now in these climate talks. That is why Angelica Navarro is not here, because she represents a direct threat to the interests of the future interests of Europe and America and the G8 countries. And I think that this movement, which is led, if you like, by the social movements and the unions and the indigenous peoples in Latin America, is now spreading. And we see it here. We see it being picked up here. These ideas are spreading very, very quickly. And all I would say to the British government is you can stop somebody coming in, but you can't stop her ideas coming in. The ideas will come in. They don't need a visa. They just sort of walk in through the back door. And so what's happening now, that is fundamental. Hundreds of billions of dollars are at stake. This is not just about making a little commitment to this or that. America can see very clearly that if it can limit China's development by setting a certain target or timetable on it, or India or wherever, it is going to be able to carry on as it were. If Lord Stern and the money men can limit it to $100 billion being exchanged between North and South, eventually, then they will have done fantastically well, because they will have avoided all that historical responsibility. They would have avoided the vast cost. Now, the question is, can the ideas of Bolivia and the demands of the Bolivians and the other Alba countries and the Africans and the LDCs, can they actually hold sway? Are they realistic? And that's what's going to be played out in Cancun. I don't think we'll see the end of it. Two things. Every government minister here is going to play it down. They're all going to say, oh, don't expect anything, this is all going to be sort of very quiet and no one's going to be there, and so on and so on. They don't want us to they don't want us to expect anything, because what happened in Copenhagen was a complete and utter disaster. I would say the more they say don't expect anything, the more we should expect something. And I would think that the backdoor deals which are being done even now with Mexico in the lead and Obama and the boys putting the pressure on Latin America and whatever. I mean, I think we would. It may not be the epic thing which we saw in the epic shambles we saw in Copenhagen, but I suspect that we will see some sort of pretty interesting dialogue. I'll tell you one thing. It was really lovely. I was back in Copenhagen. We got a phone call. This is how things work here. I mean, in these sort of slightly mad meetings. I think it was on day 2 or day 3. We got a telephone call from a very senior diplomat saying, could we come and come and see him in his office? And so I did, and I was sort of ushered through the first office, and he said, no, come into the next office. And even that, so we ended up in this tiny little broom cupboard about the size of this table. And he says, I am going to give you something very important. What's that? He said, it's called the Danish text. And I don't want to find the Danish text. And anyway, so he gave me this piece of paper. And I said, well, there's no text here. This is an interpretation. This is an interpretation clearly by China, because it had China on the top, of this mythical or other text which was supposed to be doing the round. And so I said, well, it's very good, but we need the text. And he said, oh, no, you'll have to wait till tomorrow. And he was whispering. I said, why are you, that's quite lovely. I said, why are you whispering? And he pointed up. And, of course, the American, office or whatever you call it, thing, it was only about 30 yards, but clearly they were sort of bugging the whole damn thing. So he said, shh, tomorrow you go to wherever it is, and a car will pick you up and we'll go 10 miles out of town, and I'll hand you the text. And all right, it's tremendous stuff. So anyway, I turned up the next day at this place, and he's not there, no one's there. So it's a bit difficult. So then what happens is that we actually, so I've got the interpretation of the text, but not the text. But meanwhile, there's an Indian, the wonderful Nitin, who works on his voice, and eventually we put the two together. And it's like a bomb, because what happens is that, 26 countries have signed up to this wretched thing. But that meant that 175 did not know what was in it, did not know about it. And it was like the dishonesty of it was so offensive, it was so extraordinary, that it was like a bomb being put under the whole thing. And it was like sort of like the blue touch paper and run away. And I don't think the same will happen again, but I do think that was clearly developing countries learning how to use the Western media, learning how to use people like me and others, and very happily to go along with this, and working to undermine things. And I think what we're seeing now is a much more open and transparent way of working and for these ideas to come out. And clearly there's immense amounts at stake, and I'm being told to stop, so I will stop. Thank you very much.